Hello, everyone. Hope that you're doing well. Thanks for joining this session today to learn about insights into school climate and more from the nation's report card. So today's presentation, myself and Grady Wilburn, one of my colleagues at NCS, are going to show you how data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, can be used to examine factors related to students' learning environments for the nation as a whole, but also specifically for Catholic schools. So as I mentioned, Dr. Wilburn and I were going to share an overview of NAEP and some of the latest NAEP data that provide relevant insights that go beyond the student achievement data you may be familiar with. In particular, we will look at what the 2019 NAEP data can tell us about teacher satisfaction and support, and how learning opportunities for students varied across the country and by school type in spring of 2021. We will also give you an idea of the types of data we are collecting through our 2022 assessment cycle to further inform our understanding of how student learning and achievement have changed since the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. But let's first start with an overview of the National Assessment of Educational Progress, also known as NAEP. So what is NAEP? So it's administered by the National Center for Education Statistics within the U.S. Department of Education and within the Institute of Education Sciences. It's congressionally mandated and serves as an integral part of our nation's evaluation of the condition and progress of education. And since 1969, NAEP has provided a common measure of student achievement across the country in a variety of subjects. Assessments are conducted in math, reading, science, writing, the social sciences, economics, the arts, and technology, and engineering literacy. NAEP is also regarded as the gold standard of large-scale assessments due to its challenging and high-quality assessment content and rigorous design and methodology. Let me talk a little bit about what NAEP is designed to do. So it's designed to help inform educators, researchers, policymakers, and other stakeholders about the condition and progress of academic education in the United States. We track trends in student performance over time and provide meaningful and useful comparisons across states and jurisdictions. NAEP reports on group-level student performance across broad areas of knowledge and skills and provides contextual information related to student learning. And NAEP also serves as a leader in large-scale assessments. It takes a leading role in innovation by being on the cutting edge of technology-based assessments. Now I want to talk a little bit more about reporting and for whom results are available. So NAEP is primarily administered to 4th, 8th, and 12th graders in public and private schools across the country. On occasion, as we will see in a little bit, we also conduct our long-term trend assessments, which are given to students who are 9, 13, and 17 years old. National results are available for all assessments and subjects. Math and reading results for public schools are also available for states and the 27 districts that have participated in the Trial Urban District Assessment, which you can see as the blue dots on the map. In addition to overall results for students, NAEP assessment results are reported for certain groups of students based on their race, ethnicity, gender, eligibility for the National School Lunch Program, parents' education level, disability status, and status as English language learner. Assessment results are also reported based on community and school factors such as region of the country, school location including city, suburb, town, and rural, school type including public, private, including Catholic schools specifically, or charter schools. It's important to note that we can't report data at these levels without adequate participation of schools and students. Because of Catholic schools' participation over the years, we are able to share these results with you today. So with that, let's take a quick look at the type of NAEP results you are most likely familiar with, achievement results. We'll first look at average math scores over the past 40 years or so, with results from our long-term trend assessments for 9 and 13-year-old students. 2020 assessments were conducted just months and in some cases weeks before the pandemic closed schools across the country. We released these results last year and they have received a lot of attention, primarily because of the plateauing and our decreasing scores that you can see were evident even before the pandemic began. We just finished conducting the 2022 assessments for 9-year-olds and are looking forward to seeing what the results show. So let's look more specifically at the results from these assessments for students in public and Catholic schools. Looking first at the scores for 9-year-olds, you'll see 2 trend lines going back to 1978. The assessment has been conducted more frequently than the data points you see here, but these are markers for each decade of the assessment. So looking at the chart, a few things stand out. The gains in scores, particularly from 1978 to 2004, and the statistically higher scores for 9-year-olds in Catholic schools compared to their peers in public schools. When looking at the math results for 13-year-olds, we see those same trends. For students of both ages, students in Catholic schools have consistently outperformed their peers in public schools. You may wonder how these scores compare to scores for students in other private schools. I can tell you the scores for Catholic and other private school students were comparable until 1999, but unfortunately we haven't had enough non-Catholic private school participation in the assessment to be able to report results for the last 20 years. Now let's turn to reading scores. We see a similar trend in performance, with students in Catholic schools outperforming their peers in public schools. The difference in reading, though, is a slower rate of progress over time, with scores only increasing by a few points between 1980 and 2020. For 9-year-olds in Catholic schools, scores were actually not significantly different in 2020 compared to what they were in 1980. With their peers in public schools making gains, the achievement gap between public and Catholic school students has narrowed. Among 13-year-olds, there have been gains for students in both public and Catholic schools, though again, the rate of progress has been slower. So I hope you enjoyed these results. With that, I'm now going to pass the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Grady Wilburn. Grady is part of our reporting team. He's going to walk you through some of the tools and findings we have available to help examine performance and other educational factors such as school climate and teacher resources.
Thanks, Bill. That was a great overview of the trends we've been seeing in math and reading performance for students in Catholic schools. I want to take a quick minute to introduce our viewers to one of our interactive dashboards. The Public, Private, and Charter Schools dashboard is available at nationsreportcard.gov. And this tool lets you easily access and compare results for students in different types of schools. You can use it to compare students' achievement, educational experiences, and demographics. I'll give a quick demo of the tool to show you how you can compare the percentages of students performing at the different achievement levels Bill has been talking about. And if you have your phones available, you can scan the QR code you see here and try it out for yourself. So here you see our public, private, and charter school dashboard, again, available at the nationsreportcard.gov. When doing the comparisons, you can look at several different student groups. Here you see we have data by race, ethnicity, gender, eligibility for the National School Lunch Program. And you also see all of the subjects below. Now you won't see long-term trend data in here. I know that's the data that Bill was just sharing, but you do see all of our other main NAEP assessments. And I am going to focus on 2019 data. So when looking at average scores and NAEP achievement levels, today we're going to focus on the percent at or above NAEP proficient, but you see the other options there with not only our scale scores, but also NAEP advanced and the NAEP basic level. So just to give you a quick glimpse of the type of graphics and data you can get, I'm going to first select mathematics. And what you'll see is the percent at or above proficient, since that was the metric that I chose, by the different school types. And we have public, we have charter school, we have private, and then we also have private school Catholic students, which is the data we've been focusing on. So here you see the results. You have dark blue is our public school students, kind of that lighter shade of blue, or our charter school students. And then you see this light blue bar is our private Catholic school students. This dash again represents the fact that we don't have reliable estimates for all private schools due to low participation. But again, due to the high participation of Catholic school students, we are able to report those data. And so for grade 4, you see that 40% of students in public schools were at or above proficient. For charter schools, that's 37%. And then for Catholic schools, 48% of Catholic school students scored at or above proficient in our NAEP mathematics assessment in grade 4. For grade 8, you see a similar relationship with public school students, 33% at or above proficient, 29% at or above proficient for charter school. And then for our private Catholic school students, 44% at or above proficient. Again, same pattern for grade 4 and 8. And for grade 12, we don't have enough participation at the Catholic school level to disaggregate those scores, but maybe in the future we will. And so that's just a glimpse of the type of data that you can see, and it's very user-friendly. We designed it that way to quickly ascertain data. This is looking at or above proficient, but again, you can look at it for at or above basic, advanced, and also just by the different scale score options as you see here. Now we are going to dive into insights into school climate from the 2019 grade 8 assessments. Today, we are specifically looking at data related to teacher satisfaction and access to coaches and volunteers in schools. Few people realize that students, teachers, and administrators answer contextual questions that relate to these types of topics as part of NAEP. With the implications of COVID-19 pandemic for school climate and educators' roles in responding to changing environments and students' needs, we wanted to discuss the results with you today so that you can get a sense of the kind of insights NAEP provides. We asked all of these same questions in the assessments that were just completed, so we will have comparable data for findings before and during the massive school closures. Please note that while we are only featuring 8th grade results on screen today, similar NAEP data can be found for grades 4 and 8, as well as other subjects online. At the end of the presentation, I'll be sure to show you how to find that information. Very briefly, I do want to explain how we collect this information. The insights that we're about to share come from a part of NAEP that may not be familiar to you, the NAEP survey questionnaires. Participating students, their teachers, and their school administrators answer brief surveys that help us provide information about the context in which students are learning in and out of the classroom, and help us explain how different factors are related to student performance. You can examine findings based on the percentage of students who have different educational experiences, as we will do today, and you can examine the relationship between those experiences and students' academic achievement. We won't be looking too closely at achievement relationships today, but please keep in mind that if you look at these relationships on your own, it's very important to remember that student achievement is a reflection of many factors. Just because there is a relationship between achievement and a single variable, it doesn't mean that changing that variable will also change achievement. Correlation can often be confused with causation. Still, examining the relationships across several related variables can be informative. All right, with that, let's dive into what we have learned about school climate, specifically in terms of teacher satisfaction in public and Catholic schools. We'll examine responses to 3 questions that were answered by teachers and participating students. All of the results we share are based on the percentages of students whose teachers responded according to the different answer options. As with all NAEP results, the findings are in terms of the students, even when the questions are answered by their teachers or school administrators. The first question we'll look at, ask teachers to indicate how much the following statement applies to them as a teacher. I am satisfied with being a teacher at this school. Teachers were asked if the statement sounded not at all like them, a little bit like them, somewhat like them, quite a bit like them, or exactly like them. As you can see, for both grades 4 on the left side of your screen and grade 8 on the right side, students in Catholic schools identified in the gold bars were significantly more likely than their peers in public schools to have teachers who reported the highest level of satisfaction. Looking at the bars for exactly like me, you can see the asterisks indicate when there is a statistically significant difference between the private and the public school percentages represented in the dark blue bars. We also see that the results are fairly consistent across grades, which is encouraging. For another question, teachers were asked to indicate how much the statement, "My work inspires me," applies to them as a teacher, with the same response options ranging from not at all to exactly like me. Once again, we see that 4th and 8th graders in Catholic schools were more likely than their peers in public schools to have teachers who responded that the statement sounded exactly like me. When you combine the percentages of students whose teachers said the statement sounded quite a bit or exactly like them, you see that approximately 90% of 4th and 8th grade students in Catholic schools were taught by more inspired teachers, as opposed to approximately 80% of their peers in public schools. And lastly, for this section, when it came to the statement, I am supported by the teachers at my school, Catholic school students were also more likely than their public school peers to have teachers who responded that the statement sounded exactly like me. And once again, we can see that the majority of students in Catholic schools had teachers who felt the statement sounded quite a bit or exactly like them. So all in all, these data show a positive picture of teacher satisfaction at Catholic schools. And remember, these data are from 2019. Now let's look at some data related to teachers' access to coaches and volunteers in school and how that varies across Catholic and public schools. These questions were answered by school administrators. And again, these results are from 2019. Here we can see the responses to the question of whether there was a math coach available to teachers at the school. As you can see, the results were similar across grades. Again, grade 4 on the left, grade 8 on the right, with 88 to 90% of Catholic school students having administrators who reported that there is not a math coach, compared to around 60% for public schools. When it comes to responses to the same question for a literacy coach, we see a similar pattern. Although it is notable that at grade 4, more than half of public school students had administrators who indicated that there was a literacy coach available for teachers, either full-time or part-time. In comparison, only 9% of Catholic school students attended schools where literacy coaches were available to their teachers. The last question in this section relates to the presence of parents or guardians that volunteer regularly in the school or classroom. I'm sure the taller blue bars stand out to you. In public schools, those bars show that 69% of 4th graders and 75% of 8th graders attended schools where less than 10% of parents volunteered regularly. In contrast, in Catholic schools, 32% of 4th graders and 42% of 8th graders attended schools where parents volunteered at that frequency. When you look at the percentages of students in Catholic schools where 26% or more parents volunteered, however, you see much higher rates than for students in public schools. Now, for all these findings that we've looked at today, there are many factors that could be influencing the results. And as we've discussed, these factors also relate to achievement. We provide this data as both context for performance and insights into different learning opportunities for students across the country in different types of schools in different states and more. As Catholic school educators, we hope they have inspired you to look more deeply at the data as we think through how best to continue supporting one another and your students. Now that we've given you a sampling of the type of NAEP data that are available, we want to demonstrate how you could access more data and dig into these analyses on your own using the NAEP Data Explorer or the NDE. We'll switch our focus area for this demonstration and take a look at variables related to professional development for teachers, particularly in the area of whether schools offered training on digital devices in 2019. The NAEP Data Explorer is the tool we have used to run all the analyses we've shown you here today. You can use the Data Explorer to see the results of specific assessments across multiple years and broken down for the reporting groups we've discussed, as well as many others. The NDE will generate tables and graphs. It will run statistical significance tests and more. And you can export all of your findings into a Word, Excel, or PDF format, or email yourself a link. Why don't we get started? So here you see the NAEP Data Explorer available at the nationsreportcard.gov. And again, you'll hear me use the short term NDE as just some short term for the NAEP Data Explorer. But here's for all the data from all the data collections for the last couple of decades. All our data is in this Explorer, including the data that we just shared with you. And so I'm just going to give you a very quick tutorial. I had to pull some data and do a quick finding by the different school types. So the first thing you want to do is you want to choose your subject. Since we've been focusing on mathematics, I'll just go ahead and choose mathematics. And we'll go with 8th grade, but you see here you can select, 4th, 8th, or 12th. For the year, why don't we just stick with 2019, which is kind of checked there by default. And then for the scale, since there are subscales for mathematics, you do have the choice. But I'm going to just choose an overall composite scale, which is just the average score across all the scales. All right, as we move down to jurisdiction, I'm going to stick with national. National includes both our public school students and our private school students. As you can imagine, national public is just public school students, and in large city are just those students that attend schools in a city where there's at least 250,000 residents. But you can also see here if you want to choose state level, districts, etc. Those options are also available up there under the variable tab. All right, moving down to variable. This is where you can see all the different questions that students were asked, that schools were asked, or that students were asked, or schools were asked, I'm sorry, students, teachers, and schools. So let's first look at a school type variable. And so we're going to go major reporting groups, and then we're going to go to where it says school factors. And here where it says public or non-public school, if you click on the view details, that could show you the exact question that we're looking at. And so here, this question will organize all the schools or teachers or students by the type of institution that they responded from. And so you see here, we got public, we got other private, we have Catholic, we have BIE schools, or Bureau of Indian Education, and Department of Defense schools. So I'm going to use that as kind of my population group that's going to kind of break my population into different groups. But then I also want to look at a training question. And so particularly about training with digital devices, we know over when school closures occurred, teachers had to scramble. Some teachers had to scramble and some schools had to scramble to figure out how to teach over Zoom or whatever the platform was you're using. So let's look at how training was. And again, these data are from 2019. So I'm going to go to school factors, and then I'm going to go to, let's see, actually, I think I'm going to go to, yeah, I think school factors was right. I'm going to go down to resources. All right, there's hundreds of questions, and so it can be a little tricky to navigate all of these. I'm going to show you a shortcut here in a second. let's see, where's that question at? Right here. I'm going to look at this question that asked, in this school year, did your school offer training for teachers on how to use computers or other digital devices? Now, again, this question was asked in 2019, but when these data come out for 2022, this same question would have been asked. And so we can be able to compare this finding to the finding we'll get when the 2022 data are released. Now, as far as that shortcut goes, if you do want to just type in here where it says search variables and you want to look at, I don't know, say training, you can just type it in there and then you'll see all the questions that come up that have training in it. So that's just a quick way if you didn't want to scroll through the hundreds and hundreds of questions we've asked. So I've selected two variables, school type, and then I accepted the training on digital devices. But instead of looking at those two separately, I want to look at them together. And so what that's called is a cross tabulation. And so it allows you to look at those two groups together. So of the teachers by the different school locations who answered those questions, I can look at it across those variables. And to do that, we try to make it, again, as user-friendly as possible. You just click on Create Crosstab, and then all the variables that you selected, they'll pop up in this window. You select the two that you want to kind of group together into this crosstab, and then you just give it a new name. So I'm going to give this school type by training digital. See if that works out. All right, and you see my variable is right down there, and you want to click submit, and then you're good to go. The final thing is the statistic that you want to report out on. And so average scores is going to be checked by default, but then I'm also going to check percentages. So not only will I see how students who have teachers that answer this question a certain way performed, but then I can also see the percentage across the different school types and the different answer options for the training. So after you've done that, you go down here and you can just confirm the variables that you've selected, and then you just click Create Report. And here is my report right here. You can see the variables again that I selected. I'm going to click Show Report Data. And here is my table, all right? And so again, I had a crosstab with two questions. The first one was training by the school offering computer digital device training. And you see the answer options were, yes, they offer it to all teachers, yes, they offer it to some teachers, or no, they don't offer it. And then you see the different school types here: public, other private, Catholic, BIE, or Department of Defense. And again, this is just 2019 data, but if you did want to see this for previous data collections, you recall you could select different years. And so what we're seeing here is that 57% of public school students had teachers that said, yes, this training was offered to all students. If we go down to Catholic school, you see that 65% of students had teachers that said, yes, this was offered to all students. And as you go across the rows, you can see how the percentages differ, 14 versus 9 if we just focus on public and Catholic. And then you can focus on here, 28% of public school students had teachers where this wasn't offered at all versus 26% of Catholic school students. And if you want to get fancy, you can start running your statistical tests up here. You can do gap analysis. You can do all sorts of things. But one thing before I leave this, I did want to point out is that you can quickly export these data by just clicking export and then choosing the data that you want to export it, and then in the format that you want to export it in. And so that's my quick and dirty tutorial of the NDE. But as you can see, there's just a countless amount of analysis and analyses you can do here to, again, help understand the learning environment of America's students, whether it's in public schools or Catholic schools. Now, so far, we've been looking at data from before the pandemic, but I want to switch gears a bit and look at some NAEP data that offers insights into student learning opportunities during the spring of 2021, about a year into the pandemic. When it began in 2020, NCES worked with the U.S. Department of Education leadership and Congress to postpone the scheduled 2021 assessments to earlier this year. However, there was a desire to gather data as possible given the circumstances that can help provide insight on the conditions of learning for students. So during the spring of 2021, NCES administered a special survey through NAEP. The survey was conducted monthly to provide information about where students were learning remotely, in hybrid environments, and in person, and how those experiences varied across the country and for different groups of students. Here you can see one example of the data that was collected. This chart shows us the type of instruction offered to all students in May of 2021, remote, hybrid, or in person, and how it compared between Catholic and public school students. You can see that the pattern was largely the same across grades, with Catholic school students being much more likely to have in-school learning opportunities than their public school peers. Also of note is that Catholic schools and public schools were both more likely to offer either remote or in-person learning rather than hybrid. We believe these results will provide important context for the achievement results we see from the 2022 assessments that we just completed data collection for. With that, I will pass it back over to Bill, who can share a bit more about the information we're gathering as part of those 2022 assessments. Bill?
Thank you, Grady. As we've noted, we just recently wrapped up the 2022 NAEP assessments. I'd like to close today's presentation by sharing just two examples of the additional questions we've asked to learn more about school climate and students' learning opportunities as the pandemic goes on. First, we'll look at a question for teachers that asks how often this school year they have taken certain measures to address gaps in learning that may have occurred during COVID-19 school closures. They were asked to note if they implemented diagnostic assessments to evaluate gaps, remedial measures aimed at reducing those gaps, remedial measures focused on students with disabilities, and remedial measures focused on English learners. We also asked teachers about other measures they may have implemented to address gaps in learning, such as reviewing content that students should have learned last year, providing individualized support, offering additional learning time or sessions outside of regular instruction, collaborating with other teachers and staff, and providing parents or guardians with at-home learning materials or activities. In addition to understanding what learning experiences and opportunities students had in the spring of 2021, having this information from 2022 will provide important context for the 2022 NAEP achievement results. It will also provide important information about what is being asked of our teachers across the country as they work to support students during an unprecedented time. As always, participation from public and Catholic schools alike is vital so that we can continue to provide this important information. We know your time is valuable and truly appreciate all you are doing for our students. So we thank you to all who participated in the recent NAEP assessments and hope you will continue to do so in the future. In closing, thank you for your time today. We hope that you found this to be helpful and informative. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Grady, as noted on the slide, and have a great day.